Welcome to the Truth Chronicles, where we seek to shed light on the darkest corners of history. In today's episode, we delve into the early years of a figure who would forever etch his name into the annals of global infamy, Osama bin Laden. We will explore the complex tapestry of his life, starting from his birth and early upbringing, through his rise to notoriety, and eventually his downfall. Remember, understanding history is crucial to deciphering the present and predicting the future. Let's embark on this journey together and unravel the mysteries of the past. Stay tuned as we reveal the birth of a controversial figure. Have you ever wondered how the life of one of the world's most infamous figures, Osama bin Laden, began? Born on a chilly day in March of 1957 in the bustling city of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Muhammad bin Awad bin Laden was the 17th of 52 children. His father, Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden, a wealthy businessman, and his mother, Alia Ghanem, a woman of prominent Yemeni descent, painted a picture of privilege and affluence. His father's philanthropy and piety were well known throughout Saudi Arabia, contributing to the construction of mosques and roads. Raised within the comforts of wealth, Osama received a private education, a luxury few could afford. However, when he was just 13, tragedy struck as his father died in a plane crash. Raised by his siblings, the young Osama was thrust into a life of uncertainty. The young Osama, thrown into a life of uncertainty after his father's demise, was just at the onset of a journey that would shake the world. Osama bin Laden's early years were deeply influenced by the teachings of Islam. Growing up in the heartland of Saudi Arabia, he was imbued with a profound sense of religious obligation from an early age. His education, steeped in the tenets of Islam, took place at the Handler Soul Academy, a religious school in the holy city of Mecca. This is where bin Laden was first exposed to the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood, a movement that would significantly shape his worldview. The Muslim Brotherhood, a fundamentalist group born in Egypt, espoused a vision of a global Islamic society governed by Sharia law. Their goal was the establishment of a global Islamic caliphate, a concept that resonated deeply with the young bin Laden. Their teachings, which advocated for jihad, or holy war, as a means to achieve this end, found a receptive audience in bin Laden. During this formative period in his life, bin Laden crossed paths with Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian scholar and fervent anti-Israel activist. Azzam, who had fought against Israel in several wars, became a close friend and mentor to bin Laden. His influence on the young Saudi was profound, introducing him to the concept of global jihad, an idea that would define bin Laden's life and actions in the years to come. Azzam's teachings fostered in bin Laden a belief in the necessity of violence to defend Islam against perceived threats. This belief, combined with the fundamentalist teachings of the Muslim Brotherhood, created a potent mix that shaped bin Laden's ideological outlook. This period of bin Laden's life was crucial in his transformation from a privileged Saudi youth to a radical Islamic ideologue. The seeds of this radical ideology were planted in the fertile ground of his religious education and nurtured by his friendship with Azzam. As we will see, these seeds would grow into a belief system that justified violence in the name of Islam, leading to the creation of one of the most notorious terrorist organizations in history. The seeds of radical ideology were sown, shaping bin Laden's perspective on Islam and the world. In 1980, bin Laden's life took a significant turn. He left the comfort of his privileged upbringing in Saudi Arabia and stepped into the rugged terrain of Afghanistan. This was a time when Afghanistan was under the iron grip of Soviet occupation, and bin Laden, fueled by his religious convictions, joined the Mujahideen forces in their fight against the foreign invaders. His involvement was not confined to the battlefield alone. He worked closely with his mentor, Abdullah Azzam, who founded Maktab al-Qidamat, known as the MAC. This organization became a lifeline for the Afghan resistance, providing financial and logistical support. Bin Laden's wealth and his family's connections played a crucial role in facilitating this aid, and it was within the ranks of the MAC that bin Laden met individuals who would later become key figures in Al-Qaeda, such as Ayman al-Zawahiri. These encounters not only shaped bin Laden's future, but also the face of global terrorism in the years to come. The Afghan war was a crucible that honed bin Laden's ideological beliefs. He developed a vehement hatred for communism and secular ideologies, which he perceived as grave threats to Islam. His experiences in Afghanistan further reinforced his belief in the necessity of violence and jihad as means to counter these threats. When the Soviets finally withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989, bin Laden emerged as a figure of reverence. He was hailed as a hero, a champion of the Islamic cause who had stood firm against a superpower. But the war had also irrevocably changed bin Laden. It had solidified his beliefs in violent jihad and his opposition to communism and secular ideologies, and so, as the dust of the war settled, bin Laden returned home to Saudi Arabia. But he was a changed man, carrying the seeds of a movement that would soon shake the world. But that is a story for another time. For now, let's remember, the war changed bin Laden, solidifying his beliefs in violent jihad and his opposition to communism and secular ideologies. Back in Saudi Arabia, bin Laden was hailed as a war hero. The years of battle had not only forged bin Laden into a seasoned warrior, but they had also solidified his conviction that violent jihad was the only path to defend Islam against its enemies. Upon his return, bin Laden was not content to rest on his laurels. Using his family's wealth and connections, he poured resources into Islamic charities and organizations. But these entities were not just about philanthropy. Behind the scenes, many served as fronts for terrorist activities, echoing the clandestine operations he had run during the Soviet-Afghan War. Meanwhile, bin Laden's ideology was taking a new and ominous turn. In 1988, he issued a fatwa, a religious edict, that called for the formation of a global Islamic army. His aim? To overthrow what he saw as corrupt regimes in the Middle East and unite the Ummah or Islamic community under a single caliphate. This was a call to arms, a rallying cry for radicals who shared bin Laden's vision of a world united under the banner of Islam. It was also the birth of Al-Qaeda, or the base in Arabic. The name was a nod to the database of militants that bin Laden had meticulously compiled during the Soviet war in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda's early goals were ambitious and far-reaching. Bin Laden sought to expel American troops from Saudi Arabia, topple secular governments in the region, and liberate Palestine from Israeli occupation. Beyond the Middle East, Al-Qaeda lent support to militant movements worldwide, from Chechen rebels in Russia to Kashmiri separatists in India. But Al-Qaeda was not just about supporting other groups. It was an entity with its own agenda, its own resources, and its own network of dedicated followers. Bin Laden was its architect and its driving force. Al-Qaeda was born out of bin Laden's vision of a unified Islamic community, a vision that would lead to a wave of terror and violence. In the early 1990s, bin Laden's activities expanded beyond Saudi Arabia. Seeking a new base of operations, he relocated to Sudan, a country that offered him safe haven and the opportunity to establish training camps and bases for his burgeoning organization, Al-Qaeda. In Sudan, bin Laden's influence began to spread. He leveraged his wealth and connections to fund a vast network of businesses, ranging from farming to construction, which served as fronts for Al-Qaeda's operations. These ventures not only provided cover for his activities, but also facilitated the movement of funds and resources necessary for the group's survival and growth. During this period, bin Laden also sought to form alliances with other like-minded entities. One such alliance was with Iran, a nation that shared his deep-seated opposition to the United States and its regional allies. Despite sectarian differences, they found common ground in their shared enmity. Tehran began providing funding and weapons to Al-Qaeda, while bin Laden reciprocated by supporting Iran's proxies in Lebanon and Palestine. However, bin Laden's time in Sudan was not to last. In 1996, the Sudanese government, under mounting international pressure, asked him to leave. The eviction was a blow, but bin Laden was far from defeated. He had used his time in Sudan to build an infrastructure that would sustain Al-Qaeda in the years to come. He had also fostered alliances that would prove crucial in his global jihad. With Sudan no longer an option, bin Laden turned his sights towards Afghanistan. He found a welcoming host in the Taliban regime, which not only offered him protection, but also shared his extremist interpretation of Islam. Afghanistan, with its rugged terrain and lawlessness, was an ideal location for bin Laden to regroup and plan his next moves. Despite being forced out of Sudan, bin Laden found refuge in Afghanistan, setting the stage for his future endeavors. His relocation marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one that would see him become the most wanted man in the world. Osama bin Laden's early life and influences shaped the course of history, in ways we are still grappling with today. Born into privilege, bin Laden's worldview was shaped by his upbringing, his exposure to Islamic teachings, and the untimely death of his father. His experiences in Afghanistan, fighting against the Soviet occupation, further deepened his religious convictions and his belief in the necessity of violent jihad. Bin Laden's return to Saudi Arabia and his subsequent formation of al-Qaeda marked a significant turning point, not just in his life, but in the world at large. His ties to Iran and Sudan and his role in supporting militant movements globally have had far-reaching implications that continue to resonate. The journey of Osama bin Laden from a privileged child to the founder of al-Qaeda reminds us how personal experiences and beliefs can have profound global impacts.
Bin Laden's early life was steeped in privilege and wealth, far from the austerity he would later preach. Born into a prosperous family, he enjoyed the benefits of his affluence. But his upbringing was not merely about luxury. It also sowed the seeds of the complex personality he would grow to embody. Bin Laden was a man of many interests. He enjoyed horseback riding and playing soccer. He even had a penchant for Hollywood movies, a stark contrast to the anti-Western rhetoric he would later espouse. Yet these hobbies were not the only things that defined him. His personal life was also marked by his multiple marriages and fatherhood to no less than 20 children. But beyond these facets of his life, what truly distinguished bin Laden were his personality traits. He was known to be charming and persuasive, an attribute that allowed him to connect with ordinary people. His charisma was such that he could draw people into his circle, making them feel special and valued. Yet, this charm was also coupled with a controlling nature. Bin Laden demanded absolute obedience from those around him, and was not averse to resorting to violence to ensure this compliance. His persuasive skills were not merely confined to his interpersonal relationships. They extended into his leadership style as well. Bin Laden had the uncanny ability to rally people behind his cause, convincing them to join him in his pursuits. This was a testament to his powerful oratory skills and his ability to manipulate emotions to his advantage. In contrast to his calls for poverty and sacrifice among his followers, bin Laden himself lived a life of luxury. He was a man of contradictions, a man who preached austerity yet indulged in the comforts his wealth afforded him. This dichotomy, however, only added to the enigma that was Osama bin Laden. His life and personality continued to intrigue and perplex, a testament to the complex character he was. Despite his call for poverty and sacrifice among his followers, bin Laden himself lived a life of luxury. Osama bin Laden was deeply religious, but how did his beliefs shape his actions? Let's delve into this. Bin Laden's worldview was heavily influenced by his strong religious convictions. He viewed politics and violence through the lens of Islamic theology. His interpretation of Islam was one where all Muslims had a personal duty to defend their faith and work towards establishing a global caliphate. He found inspiration in the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, a 14th century scholar. Bin Laden would often reference Taymiyyah's works to justify his actions, seeing in them a theological endorsement for his extremist views. But bin Laden's vision of Islam was not just about theology. It was also about unity. He saw himself as a unifying force for Muslims around the world. He called for unity among Sunnis and Shias against what he perceived as Western aggression. His vision was one where all Muslims, regardless of their sect, would come together to defend their faith. However, unity, as per bin Laden's perspective, was not just about coming together. It was about total obedience. He demanded absolute obedience from his followers, willing to use violence against anyone he saw as a threat to his goals. Yet his interpretation of Islam, his extremist views, and his call for unity were not accepted by everyone. Many scholars and Muslim leaders rejected his version of Islam. They saw his actions as heretical, a deviation from the true teachings of Islam. His use of violence and his extremist views were seen as going against the principles of peace and tolerance that are central to the faith. So, while bin Laden saw himself as a defender of Islam and a unifying force for Muslims, many within the Muslim community saw him differently. They saw him as a man whose beliefs and actions were not representative of their faith. Bin Laden's extremist views, however, were seen as heretical by many. His interpretation of Islam was controversial, and his actions were seen by many as a distortion of the faith he claimed to defend. For nearly a decade after the 9/11 attacks, bin Laden remained elusive. What was he up to during these years? in the years following the tragic events of September 11th, bin Laden took on the role of a spectre haunting the collective consciousness of the West. From his hidden sanctuary, he released intermittent audio and video messages, taunting his adversaries and goading his followers to persist in their jihad. These occasional messages served to remind the world of his presence, even as his physical whereabouts remained a mystery. His health during this time was the subject of much speculation. Some reports suggested he suffered from a kidney disease that may have necessitated dialysis treatment. However, these reports were never definitively confirmed. Despite his potential health issues, bin Laden maintained an iron grip on the reins of Al-Qaeda, guiding the group's global operations from his concealed location. Then, in the early days of May 2011, the world learned that bin Laden had been hiding in plain sight. US Navy SEALs located him in the city of Abbottabad, Pakistan, ensconced comfortably in a compound not a stone's throw away from the Pakistani military academy. This revelation was startling, to say the least, and raised a slew of questions about how he had managed to avoid detection for so long. Was he shielded by sympathetic elements within Pakistan's military or intelligence services? Or was his concealment merely the result of good fortune and careful planning? The answers to these questions remain elusive, much like the man himself was for nearly a decade. Despite being one of the most wanted men in the world, bin Laden managed to remain hidden for nearly a decade. His ability to evade capture for so long speaks volumes about his cunning and his organization's capacity for secrecy. But it also underscores the immense challenges involved in hunting down a single individual in a world as vast and complex as ours. On May 1st, 2011, bin Laden's hideout was finally discovered. What transpired during this operation? Let's delve into the details of Operation Neptune Spear, a mission that marked the culmination of a decade-long hunt. On that fateful day, acting on intelligence gathered meticulously by the CIA, US President Barack Obama gave the green light for the operation. A team of 24 members from the elite SEAL Team 6 were flown into Abbottabad, Pakistan, under the cloak of darkness. Their mission? To capture or kill Osama bin Laden. As the SEALs descended upon the compound, they were met with resistance from bin Laden's bodyguards. A brief but intense firefight ensued, resulting in the death of several men and the capture of a few others. In the chaos, bin Laden retreated to his bedroom, but he wouldn't stay hidden for long. According to official accounts, bin Laden peered out from behind a door only to face SEAL Mark Owen, identified only by his pseudonym. In that moment, 2 shots were fired, and bin Laden fell backward onto a mattress. The operation had reached its climax. The world's most wanted man was no more. In the aftermath, the SEALs quickly confirmed bin Laden's death. Adhering to religious protocol, his body was wrapped in a white shroud. Within 24 hours of his death, bin Laden, along with the bodies of 3 other men killed during the raid, were buried at sea. This marked the end of an era, the conclusion of a hunt that had spanned across a decade and traversed continents. The operation was not just a military success, but a symbolic victory. It demonstrated the relentless pursuit of justice, the unwavering resolve to hold those accountable for their actions, no matter how long it takes or how far they run. After a decade-long hunt, bin Laden was finally brought to justice. Indeed, Operation Neptune Spear will forever be remembered as a pivotal moment in history, a testament to the indomitable spirit of justice. Despite his death, bin Laden's legacy continues to inspire radicalization and terrorism globally. But what exactly is his legacy? In the shadow of bin Laden, Al-Qaeda affiliates persist in their activities, with a presence in countries such as Syria, Libya, Yemen, Somalia, and Nigeria. These are not merely remnants of a once formidable network, but active groups that continue to destabilize regions and perpetuate acts of terror. Elsewhere, the rise of the Islamic State, or ISIS, has been a significant part of bin Laden's legacy. Originating as an offshoot of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, ISIS has managed to control territories and spread chaos throughout the region. They adopted bin Laden's methods, but also took them to new, horrific extremes, with publicized beheadings and the destruction of cultural heritage sites. Yet within this legacy of violence, there is controversy and division. Bin Laden's strategy of targeting civilians, of using terror to make a political point, remains a contentious issue. Even among Islamists, there is a debate. Some argue that his tactics advanced the cause of jihad, while others believe they merely created more enemies for Muslims, tarnishing the image of Islam in the process. This controversy hints at the complexity of bin Laden's legacy. Yes, he has inspired groups that continue to sow terror, but he also sparked a debate within the Muslim world about the nature of jihad and the limits of political violence. This internal critique is, in many ways, a powerful counterpoint to the violence bin Laden propagated. Bin Laden's vision of a global caliphate, a world united under Islamic law, never materialized. His dreams were built on a foundation of violence and coercion, and they crumbled under the weight of their own contradictions. Yet, bin Laden's impact on geopolitics and international relations cannot be ignored. His actions have shaped the world we live in today, from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, to the rise of ISIS, to the global discourse on terrorism and Islam. While his vision of a global caliphate never materialized, bin Laden's impact on geopolitics and international relations cannot be ignored. Osama bin Laden's life was marked by controversy and violence. A man of luxury, he wielded charm and control, championing poverty and sacrifice for his followers. Deeply religious, he viewed the world through the lens of Islamic theology, advocating for a global caliphate. His later years were shrouded in mystery until his demise in 2011. His legacy, a paradox of unity and division, continues to fuel radicalism globally. Ultimately, Osama bin Laden's name is associated with brutal acts of terrorism and the tragic loss of thousands of lives. Thank you for watching our deep dive into the life of Osama bin Laden. We hope this video has provided some insight into the complex character of a man who undeniably shaped global history. If you found this content informative and engaging, please hit that like button and share it with others who might find it of interest. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth profiles and explorations into the stories that define our world. Your support helps us create more content for you. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.